So the subject revival of the feminine comes because of the season that we're in, namely, that is for Hindus in India, or Hindus everywhere. We are in the 8th day of the Durga Puja, each day having a significance. And it can strike us that Hinduism is actually the only, well, maybe there's a Korean version of it, or Vietnamese, I should say, version of it. But really, mother worship is really the one thing which is sustained in India. And unlike other places, historically. Historically means ancient Greece had it, for example. Ancient Rome had it. But as time has gone on with the Judeo-Christian religion, or you can say the Abrahamic religions, the idea of mother worship has all but disappeared over the centuries, other than devotion to Mary in the Catholic Church. So what I'm saying is something of a replica. But when we say revival, we don't have to go back very far to see how women fought for the vote. In France, for example, the women only got the vote in 1944. I mean, that's just yesterday, essentially. And we can see how the Irish Free State, they got women's suffrage in 1922. So if we go back to ancient Greece, for example, we're the land of democracy. Well, it's not the democracy we know of today, because the people who made decisions and made a vote, got a vote, were adult males who owned land. Not even every man got to vote. And then in more modern times, let us say in Ireland, we have Bridget of Kildare, who is a very powerful abbess and bishop by all accounts. And there we see the power of women. If we go back to the ancient times in India, and we look at the Upanayam ceremony, that is the thread ceremony, nowadays it's only given to boys. Well, rarely girls, but it used to be given to every student, male or female, and it was a mark of their initiation into student life. The beginning of student life, about the age of 9 or 10, maybe even 12. And the sari that is put over the shoulder is a remnant of this thread. Initially, it wasn't a thread, it was a piece of cloth. I also had a piece of cloth hanging over my left shoulder as well. So that was a complete equality in the ancient days, but history, as it goes on, as time goes on, is not very kind to women. And I come from Africa, where women are still really second-class citizens. When I was in Zimbabwe, we had a fund based on UNESCO principles, an educational fund for women, for young girls. And you might say that's a bit discriminatory. Why not for boys? No, because it is the girls who got the least privileged educational opportunities. Swami Vivekananda, knowing this, brings Sister Nivedita across. But it wasn't the first time that education had been given to girls. In fact, there was a school for girls that was from Chandra Sakar. The first free school for girls was put. That was 1847 already. And so actually, Sister Nivedita comes late on the scene, but Swami Vivekananda sees the importance of giving education to girls, to women, because it wasn't a common thing. We have these intrusions, as it were, into the norm where women and girls were deprived. And as I say, even now in Africa, where I come from anyway, the men go and tend to the cattle and so on and so forth. The men and the boys do that, come back and they drink beer. But the women are looking after the children. They're going and they're planting the crops. They're working in the heat of the sun, making sure that the crops are tended nicely, cooking then for everybody, and attending to the children at night time, putting them to bed, and so on and so forth, and also feeding the chickens around and so on. They have a very busy, active day. And they also have to chop some wood in order to make the fire, all of these things. So, from a first world situation or a first world environment, developing world is what we call it now, as opposed to the developed world, we expect women's equality. And even now, it's the subject of contemporary debate whether women are getting equal wages in the workplace and so on. So, where are we now if we think that we are all nicely settled with gender equality? Well, not at all. Actually, hundreds of millions of women are not allowed to show their face. And Amnesty International highlights one particular country, and it says that the authorities are actually waging a war on women, is the language they're using, and girls. There is beatings, surveillance on women, sexual violence, detention, and of course then there is the clothing that only allows a woman to look out even that much, and some women have said how restrictive it is. In 15 countries, the law is that women have to obey their husbands, and males operate a kind of guardianship, using guardianship policies that violate freedom. And then, of course, there are such things as honor killings and so on. And in 59 countries, you'll be surprised to know, there is no legislation about harassment at work for women. In 20 countries, these are things we take for granted. In 20 countries, women have to marry the rapist that has molested them. And these include countries such as Russia, Thailand, Venezuela, 17 other countries also. In 104 countries, there are laws preventing women from working in certain jobs. There's no equality in the workplace in those places. Then, if you take the right to have your say, well, this right is only a recent right. In Ireland, we're going to have some presidential elections, I think. There are 2 women and 1 man. And in the past, Ireland has had women presidents. And women have held the highest offices. But it wasn't always the case. Sporadically, you'll find it here and there. In the ancient days of India, the rishis were male and female. Gargi was a famous rishi that challenged the sage Yajnavalkya. The story is there in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. In the UK, the push for voting, 1918, was there. I think the First World War changed things, where women had to man factories and what have you, while the men went off to war. I think Sweden was the most progressive. In 1718 to 1772, that period of time, they actually had this equality of gender. And in 1840, that was way before Vivekananda's time there in America, there was a women's rights convention held in New York State, but they only got their final vote later. Of course, we know Emily Pankhurst, operating in 1903, being arrested and manhandled as a women's suffragette movement to get this basic right. So when we say revival of the feminine, we're saying that on the social level, there is inequality. There was an inequality. Originally, there was equality to some extent. And ultimately, as time goes on, it swings back again and we have new values. Where did we get these values from? Well, in India, there were some kind of moves toward it, as I mentioned. The current Indian constitution prohibits gender discrimination. There is violence against women despite that. And the 40% of the world's child marriages also are in India, and 47% of women aged 20 to 24 got married before the age of 18. 56% of these are in the rural areas. And in India, which has a low, compared to other world countries, has a low record of rape, but still it's significant, fairly significant. But there's a reported rape every 15 minutes. So these are some uncomfortable facts. Even Shankaracharya tells us that we are so fortunate to have a body. After many lives we have gotten this body. We are so privileged. And then he mentions to have a male body. And people really have a knee-jerk reaction to that, but he's telling absolutely the truth. Generally, overall, universally in the world, women are still second-class citizens. Now along comes Sri Ramakrishna, and this is where we find a revivalist movement. Even though there were reformers like Ram Mohan Roy and so on, who were trying to bring some balance to this and some initiatives. Even so, by the time of Ramakrishna, we can find still this level of inequality. For example, in Bengal, on the Bengali stage, the women who acted in Girish Chandra Ghosh's dramas in Bengal were regarded as, not worthy, as kind of not even second class, maybe tertiary class or something like that, and were regarded pretty much as the scum of society and so on. And among Ramakrishna's devotees are those very women. And to the extent that women became honored for the first time in those roles. But that's not the beginning of the story. If we take Ramakrishna, we see all his life, one of the key points of his message is the upliftment of women and regarding them in a very unique way. Not just as women, not just as members of a gender divide, but much more significantly, when he himself took his thread ceremony, he highlighted, or even, before that, where he has to select somebody to do the honors. He selects the maidservant Dhani, much to the objection of others, and yet he commits to it. He says, no, that's who I want. I want her to give it to me. And then, of course, as Ramakrishna, jumping forward, goes off to the big city, Kolkata, and we know how he gets involved with Rani Rasmani's temple, Dakshineswar, not only in terms of caste, but also in terms of a woman who is powerful enough to purchase a property dedicated to Kali on the basis of a vision, and Ramakrishna serves there. Then Ramakrishna, who was very accustomed to worshipping his family deity, namely as Rama, he encounters the deity there, Kali. The other day somebody asked me about Kali. Ramakrishna is worshipping Kali. Is that a confusing thing? Is Kali God and so on and so forth? The answer is yes, in that form. And look at what he finds. Now he gets not just a vision, but he's able to describe it very, very graphically. What he's saying is, sometimes he writhed on the floor of the temple, that is, in burning agony. This anguish worldly people attributed to an attack of colic. The temple bells ringing for the evening service would make this divinely mad man cry out in passionate tones, the pathos of which could have melted a stone. And he would cry, "O mother, another day has gone, but still thou hast not appeared before me. Life is fleeting. O mother, why are you not gracious to me yet? Why have you not revealed yourself to me?" All his passion, all his attention is going toward this. Now, it gives us several lessons. One is the motherhood of God, a great emphasis that Ramakrishna gives all his life. Motherhood of God, heralding a kind of new era, a new era where we have to consider women in a very different light. The same kind of light that the ancient rishis and so on had, that, of course, in Vedanta, there's no gender. There's no male, no female, because there's only the divine Atman. So when we go underneath the surface of male and female and the possibility of apartheid, gender apartheid, as we want to call it, we come to that one steady thing, the Atman. That is the thing that is glorified and emphasized in the Upanishads and the whole of the Vedanta teaching. So, it is through the mother that he gets this vision, gets this great spiritual experience. And what is the principle of it? Yearning is the principle of it. And then we have to examine ourselves from a spiritual point of view. Do we have this yearning? Even later on, he says, this is the key. We start off with yearning. And love is the highest form of it. Like the yearning for a miser for his money, or yearning for a chaste wife, from a chaste wife for the husband, or yearning like that. A yearning or yearning for air, described in the story, when a teacher dunks a student into the water, gasping for air. So he's saying, why are you not gracious to me yet? Because he knows she has appeared to others who have written songs and so on about it. Why have you not revealed yourself to me? And how could the mother remain deaf to the doleful cries of her little innocent child? Because to understand oneself before the mother, you yourself will be positioned as a child. That means I have an opportunity for surrendering, being looked after, being nurtured. And Ramakrishna often tells the story, well, as long as we are playing around and romping, the mother leaves us and hides away. And then when the child gets desperate, where are you? Where are you? I can't find you. The mother appears. And that's exactly what happened. How long could she hide herself? She revealed herself before the mother's child as pure consciousness, pure bliss, and in all her resplendent glory. Now you see, I was in a discussion with some people, I remember some years ago in Kilkenny, and there was somebody brought up in the non-dualistic system, as it were, and said, oh, this Ramakrishna, it was a hallucination, you see. It was all his fevered brain. Sounded like the skeptic who became Vivekananda. And then he himself got the experience of Kali. He got the experience of Kali to such an extent that he says, in India there are two great evils, trampling on the women and grinding the poor through caste restrictions. And then you see, he says, why should I marry when I see in every woman only the Divine Mother? Why do I make all these sacrifices to emancipate myself from earthly ties and attachments so that there will be no rebirth for me and so on? And then he considered Sita as the ideal Indian woman. ideal Indian woman? Is it the ideal universal woman? We'll discuss that. And he also told the ideal womanhood of India is motherhood, that marvelous, unselfish, all-suffering, ever-forgiving mother. And he understood the day India started neglecting their women, the downfall of the nation started. I can see that in every African nation as well. And so we see this wonderful, wonderful attitude. Where did he derive it from? Can you better the condition of your women? He says. Then there will be hope for your well-being. Otherwise, you will remain as backward as you are now, he says. If you don't allow one to become a lion, he will become a fox. Women are a power. Only now it is more for evil because man oppresses women. She is the fox, but when she is no longer oppressed, she will become the lion. And it is no coincidence that the Sister Nivedita, who he nurtured and educated and encouraged and gave her a mission, was deemed to be something like a lioness. And then, is there any sex distinction in the Atman or the self out with the differentiation between man and woman? All is Atman. And he goes on like that. So he was very keen for the education of women and keen for their upliftment, not only for the good of the nation, posterity, but also in terms of globally. Although he says India, it must be a fact globally also. So after a long time, Ramjesh came out of meditation and finally he gets his revelation. And one day he was singing devotional songs to the Universal Mother and praying to her with tearful eyes to reveal herself. And tearfully prayed, this is her own words, "Oh Mother, I'm calling upon you with such a yearning. Why are you not paying heed? You realized yourself to Ram Prasad, Kamalakanta, these are other sages, other mystics who got the revelation. Say, why not to me? And because of this great yearning for the mother, he says, I was passing through a period of intense agony. I felt as if my heart was being wrung like a wet napkin or a wet cloth. The painful thought that mother's vision would never be vouchsafed to me was unbearable, and I thought it better to put an end to my life. That kind of desperation, do we have even an nth of it? My eyes fell on the sword hanging in a corner of the temple, and I rushed towards it like a madman to put an end to my life, when suddenly I was blessed with the divine presence and fell down bereft of consciousness. Anyway, this discussion in Kilkenny was, yes, he must have had a vision of Kali, because God is, the ultimate is formless. Yes, let me describe the vision he had. So he himself says, it was of what was happening. He says he was unconscious of what was happening outside and how that day, the next passed, and nothing whatsoever. But he also described as the doors, the temple, and everything vanished into nothingness. It seemed as if nothing existed anymore except an ocean of the spirit, boundless, dazzling. In whatever direction I turned, great luminous waves were rising. They bore down upon me with a loud roar, as if to swallow me up. In an instant they were upon me, they engulfed me. I was suffocated. I lost all natural consciousness and I fell down. And when out of this beatific vision, he once again emerged into the sense world, the word, first word on his lips, mother, was the only sound that issued in a passionate fervor from his quivering lips. And when that great intoxication of this first glimpse of the mother had somewhat abated, He was possessed with a deep longing for uninterrupted communion with her. He wanted to be always with her, to nestle in her arms like a little child, to gaze at her all the time steadfastly, even without a wink. And so it goes on. But what was the effect of it? The effect of it is that he saw every female form, every feminine form, every woman as a divine manifestation of the mother, a divine manifestation of the divine mother. And so what we see next in his life, the arrival of Sharda Devi, who he puts, after 12 years of spiritual practice, sadhana, he lays all the fruit of his spiritual experience at her feet and considers her, worships her as a divine mother of the universe. Very significant. She's about 18 or so when it happens. Now then, he presents a whole ideal because, don't forget, he was taught Advaita by Totapuri, Nangta, the Naked One. And he went into this Nirukalpa Samadhi. He describes from then on, after Samadhi, he only wanted the company of people who wanted to discuss God or their spiritual experience, no other interest in anything else. And that becomes a symptom that is a clue to us how much of our attention is based on politics, world events, or domestic issues, whatever it is, and how much is flooded or occupied with the thought of the divine in our day-to-day life, in all our particular activities, where we suffer from forgetfulness of the totality of the divine existence, that the whole thing is only the divine. And so he was married, and some people say, well, how could he be married? Why didn't he conduct life? And how was he a monk? Was he a monk? Was he married? He was everything, and taught everybody how to ideally lead a life, husband and wife. This is why Vivekananda says the highest ideal of womanhood is Sita, because if you read the Ramayana, you'll see all the emotions, all the loyalty, all the devotion, all the feeling that Sita has, all the dedication, still fixing her mind on her Lord Ram. And so the example is there. If you see the divine, if the husband sees the divine in the wife, sees her as the divine mother, what difficulty will be there? If she sees in him the Lord of the universe, what difficulty will be there? And so this intimate bond was there. Then his first teacher is Bhairavi Brahmani, of course, another woman. And she teaches him, like a child, all the ins and outs of the Vaishnavite tantric system and so on. And so all along we find this influence of women. When he was deemed to be a madman, his relatives said, oh, all the celibacy has naturally made him like this, eccentric. So they took him to prostitutes, and all he could see there was the Divine Mother. Oh, Mother, you have appeared like this, you are here. And they couldn't resist, they had to salute him, prostrate before him, and so on, feeling very ashamed that they could have even tried to tempt him. He was untemptable. Spurner of lust and greed, says the arty song. So, the very foundation of a monk's life was absolute continence. And Ramakrishna further demonstrated in his own life the possibility of a deep and abiding love existing in conjugal relationship. So that becomes the highest form of love, when the union is sanctified and sublimated between two divine godly souls. In the Gospel of Ramakrishna, Mahendranath asks him, he says, well, what if your wife becomes very disturbed and says, I'm going to commit suicide, if you don't pay more attention to me. And Ramakrishna initially says, well, he says, then let her do it. If it's going to get in the way of your spiritual life. Then he considers a little bit after a time and says, but of course, if you live a good spiritual life, if you become the example, then I'm pretty sure, or it's likely, that the wife will follow suit. Same thing with children, of course. Don't press children to do this and that. Don't force religion on them. They'll be anti-religious. But be the example. That's the point. So, is there a revival of femininity? Yes. In the First World War, what we call the developed world, we find the ideal is there. In practice, how is it? Well, we have seen that one of the biggest problems, biggest difficulties in India, from the time of Vivekananda to the present, is this abominable treatment of women, despite the fact that this period of the year is completely dedicated, and other periods throughout the year, but this is focused on the presence of the Divine Mother. And the Divine Mother is there in the mythological story, the Chandi, a very profound book which is read during all the 9 days and beyond. And there's a group in the UK who are studying this Chandi. And I hope that they get some value from it, because it's not about rote learning the mantras and all of that. It's about understanding what is the deep meaning of it. Now, why should we have a revival of the femininity? And what do we mean? Do we mean that women should be exactly equal to men in every respect? Clearly they're not. Clearly there are biological differences. But what it means is that women have a special role and great, great power. And this was recognized by Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, and so on. And I believe that this was the revival of the feminine. And if people take this seriously all over the world, not just in India, but Africa and elsewhere, even in the first world countries, then the world itself is likely to change, says Vivekananda. Now, much of the domestic difficulties and cruelty against women comes from alcohol. The alcohol is the devil, and for this reason, there have been various legislations passed in India to control that. And there's an enormous amount of work and legislation that has been done in India through various constitutional changes and laws and so on to make sure that there is gender equality, and yet there isn't. So we have to take the principles to heart. We have to practice what the principles are teaching us. And it is not that women are biologically equal or anything like that, a misunderstanding about that, not at all. But they have a tremendously powerful role, and according to the system I've just mentioned, every woman is the embodiment of the Divine Mother of the universe. That was Ramakrishna's view. When I say view, not opinion, that was his experience. That was Vivekananda's experience too. And then when you see that Ramakrishna is only one side of the coin, the other side is Holy Mother Sharda Devi, the beautiful Divine Mother being experienced in this way. There are many people who've seen pictures and portraits of the face of Sharda Devi, not knowing who she is, and commenting, this woman is something special about her. Can we have a copy of the picture? And maybe later they understand what she was and how Ramakrishna regarded her. So I hope that there is a revival of the feminine, and what we mean by the feminine, not just women. According to modern psychology, there is what is unfortunately described, or fortunately, whatever, as the male and female, the male brain, the female brain. The left side of the brain and the right side of the brain is put in terms of gender, maybe a little unfairly, but there's no doubt feminine qualities are necessary. Compassion, love, we can deem these all in the feminine. And then, of course, it is natural to put the whole of the universe in the feminine and all the energy and force in the feminine. And that is what the localized celebration of Durga and others during this period of time is about. It is about the real potency. Now, in the story of the Chandi, in that story, we find all the time the denigration in attitude, at least, for women. Men go to war, women don't. Actually, in India, there was a very famous queen who opposed the British. And so I have, her name was Rani Lakshmi by 1857. And then there were some people of Bhopal, some women, who trained in martial arts. So we can see there true embodiments, human embodiments of this divine mother who comes out and destroys all the evil in the world. But why would we have such a story? Why would we put the feminine out there and not the masculine? And so it is very clear. It is to revive the feminine, even in the 5th century of this current era. And the story tells it. So in the three stories are there. In the last story, the mother appears as a beautiful woman, divine mother of the universe, something like a goddess. And it's reported to Shumba and Nishumba, who are the demons of the day, put it that way. And they naturally, Shumba says, well, I want to possess this woman. So straight away, assuming that the woman is there available for possession. And not only that, but a little play and a little humor is introduced into it. So he sends a delegate who says, well, my master wants to marry you. Will you please come to the court? And she says, I would love to, only this. I'm paraphrasing Ambika. She says, well, I would love to, but you see, I took a vow. What is that vow? Well, the vow is that I would only marry somebody who could defeat me and overwhelm me in war. And this message goes back. Shumba gets outraged. What? You go back and tell her, I want her, and if you don't agree and come willingly, I'll drag you by the hair. See, the story is indicating that the attitude toward women in general is not so good. And what does she turn out to be? The goddess that destroys all of Shumba and Nishumba's troops. They, desperate to combat the goddess, looked like two thunderclouds raining violent showers of arrows on her. And one of the generals, Chandika, he cuts through these arrows with her own shower of arrows, wounded both the demon king's limbs with her weapons. But you see, what is the story or the dialogue between the two so far, you see, and that is that she only agrees, really, to combat them, and they can't understand it. They think she's just a helpless, beautiful woman, and they threaten to drag her by the hair and so on. And what happens, of course, is she makes a combat, destroys them all, humiliates them, and becomes a great, great goddess like that. And ultimately, Shumba saw his brother Nishumba eventually, who was dear to him as life itself, dead with all his army slaughtered. And he speaks angrily. See, anger is still there. O Durga, you have become arrogant, proud of your success. Don't boast here, there is no reason to look so haughty. You depend on these others for your strength. But she says, oh, vile creature, I am all alone in the world of movement. Who else is there besides me? There comes deep philosophy. Who else is there beside me? All these varieties, these manifestations, these forms of goddesses and so on, are manifestations, she says, of my powers. See, they dwell within me alone. And then, of course, Brahmani and all the others were absorbed into her body, and Ambika was all alone. And then she says, all these forms projected here are my attributes. I have now withdrawn them. I stand alone on the battlefield. So come on, let's fight. Now, we cannot read this or listen to this without feeling that this world is something like a grand, elusive play. Because the 24 cosmic principles that make up the entire nature, they're all her. Her aspect, the absolute, is on the one side, as it were, the relative at the other. Ramakrishna tells Naran, who became Vivekananda, he says, the one who you call Brahman, I call Kali. That's it. They're the same. One is the relative point of manifested aspect with the time and space and all the rest of it, manifesting and moving, evolving or seeming to evolve, playing out the drama, appearing one day, going the next, rolling on with time, with birth, life and death, and birth, life and death, and forever birth, life and death. And on the other side, merging into this Nirvikalpa Samadhi, this absolute existence that we call Brahman. So what is our lesson? We have to take it like a game, and we have to play it along with the Divine Mother, who is manifesting the sport. Manifesting the sport, playing the sport, making a play, directing it, producing it, acting in it. Why should we be fearful? Why should we have any doubts? Why should we ever feel miserable when we realize this? So the practical application of this understanding is all our sorrow goes away, all our fear goes away, anxiety goes away, pain goes away when we realize with discernment. What are the two essential things in spiritual life? Discernment, viveka, that is discernment, discrimination, and detachment. Detachment is the consequence of it. We have to, now let's put it in a slightly different way. We have to make a revaluation of everything. Instead of looking at the world in its split up form, we put it into one area, one generalized wholeness, and we deem it to be only the divine, nothing more. And we agree not only to witness the play, but to participate in the play in a loving way and depend on this divine grace to reveal the ultimate to us. It is only through that grace that we can do it. Not my words, Ramakrishna's words. It is only through the divine grace. It is the divine grace that keeps us in the game. It is the divine grace that releases us. And it is up to us, as long as we are happy playing our game. We can understand language, clowns, tumbling clowns. And when we are tired of tumbling, then we wake up to the truth of the reality. And it is easy to continue tumbling, but then when we're tumbling, we sometimes stop and we sometimes complain, why am I tumbling like this and hurting myself? Well, when you yearn for something different, an opening happens. Divine grace flows and transforms everything. So the whole events are worth studying and understanding, aside from the ritualistic part, studying the meaning of all of these things, these stories, and more importantly, learning from those great mystics such as Ramakrishna the technique of how to do it. First of all, you have to have a yearning, but if you have a yearning for the things of this world, you will never have a yearning for the divine. You can't have both. You cannot serve God and mammon, as Jesus had put it. So you have to wean yourself off, as it were, from the addiction of the world and develop a healthy addiction for the divine. A magnificent obsession. Think of it day and night, day and night, day and night. Practice it. Develop this yearning. Ramakrishna shows us if you weep for God, a vision of God, for 3 days only, then you will get your revelation. But who wants to, he points out, people weep for relatives and all kinds of things. But whoever weeps for God, he laments. Now you may say, well, I haven't gotten to that stage. I don't know if I could get to that stage. But you see, it depends on understanding the value you have for the world now and how to revalue it in a different way, to register it to the divine account. And not only that, but to see on the other side, not just the not this, but to see what the this is, to feel this divine grace flowing always, to be in touch with that current all the time. Like the electrical current, you switch it on, you keep tuned to that. And when the light goes off, you switch it back on again. Who switched it off? Well, you yourself did it. And then don't be surprised if there's darkness in this analogy. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. Revival of femininity. Let it be so and let it continue. So for those of a feminine persuasion, as it were, assert your femininity and your power. That's the meaning of the Chandi. And for the men, see the divine in every woman. The question of overcoming lust does not arise if you do that. It's a technique given by Ramakrishna to his intimate apostles. Well, we have time for a question. I didn't want to make this a kind of sermon, but I wanted to make it a casual discussion. But anyhow, let us see any further questions. Well, then we should leave it, yes? Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Om